Welcome to Personal Finance Cat, where I share my personal take on personal finance. Hello, we're going to talk about a hot topic today, inflation, recession, and the strategies to tackle. First of all, I have to say that inflation is not necessarily a bad thing. Why? Well, if you're like me, during the normal years, my salary usually goes up by 2 to 3% each year. I may feel slightly richer because in terms of nominal dollars, I bring home a few more bucks. Truth is though, the pay raise is not quote-unquote real because inflation makes everything more expensive by about 2 to 3% as well. Nonetheless, that good feeling keeps us optimistic, and also, some costs in our lives are kind of fixed, like our mortgages. Anyway, the magic number for inflation is around 2%, and that's why the Fed works hard to keep it as close to that level as possible. One thing to note, debtors are especially fond of inflation because it makes their debt cheaper. So as a real estate investor that has multiple mortgages, I don't mind inflation because my mortgage is the same while the rent is going up, as well as my property value as inflation takes place. What's happening currently though is definitely different. At the time of this writing, which is around February 2022, the year-over-year inflation is 7.5%. Coincidentally, I just had my compensation discussion with my manager, and guess what? My pay increase is still the good old 3%. Uh-oh. I'm sure I'm not the only one who experienced this. As a matter of fact, on the news from which I learned the latest inflation rate, the news anchor also mentioned that the average pay raise would be 3.5% this year. In a way, people are getting a pay cut, as I called it, a real wage cut. So what's the broader implication? Let's take a slight detour and talk about a concept called the multiplier effect. The easiest way to explain this is through an example. And we will start with our neighbor, Jane Doe, who got a real pay raise of $100. She's a pretty prudent person, so she always puts aside 20% of her income in her savings and investment. But getting this pay raise, she could finally afford the purse she wanted to get, which costs $80. The company that sells the purse, in turn, has to deploy that $80. To make it simple, this company is owned by a single person, John Smith, and he's the only employee of this company. After getting paid the $80, he may set aside a portion for future investment. Let's assume again it's 20%, but he paid himself the rest of it, aka 80% of $80, which is $64, and spent it on something he likes, such as a nice meal at a restaurant. A similar series of events happen with the restaurant owner, and so on and so forth. As you can tell, the $100 turns into much more, kind of like a snowball effect that gets bigger and bigger. And that's called the multiplier effect by the economists. By the magic of math, one can actually calculate how much this multiplier effect is, as we assumed that in every step, folks spend 80% of every dollar they earn. 80% is called the marginal propensity to consume, or MPC. The multiplier is 5. For those of you who want to nerd out, the formula is 1 divided by 1 minus the MPC. In other words, every $1 that's pumped into the economy becomes $5. That's really good, isn't it? The economy keeps growing and everybody is happy. Now, going back to why a real wage cut is bad. Think about the opposite effect. You have to now tighten your purse string because things cost more and your wage increase is not keeping up. So the opposite chain reaction happens. And like a downward spiral, less and less spending makes the problem worse and worse. That's when the recession happens. Businesses have to reduce employment or shut down altogether because people are not consuming as much. There we have it. That's why I think recession may be imminent. Although to be fair, usually there are many factors at play to cause a recession, so there may be some other factors that will prevent this from happening. Only time will tell. Without leaving you hanging and just being the bearer of bad news, I want to share with you some tips so that you can soften the blow from a potential recession. You may say, Personal Finance Cat, I know what to do. I should spend more money because that's what keeps the economy rolling. Didn't you just explain that? Well, thank you for your optimism and listening to my logic. But unfortunately, one person's behavior is not enough to alter the group's behavior. Have you heard of the story about a person who heard the probability of 2 bombs appearing on the plane is drastically less than 1 bomb? So he carried 1 bomb himself to the plane. It's a ridiculous story, but it's kind of similar to what will happen if you just pump up your spending alone during the recession. It's not going to make a difference. So what should we do instead? Here are a few tips for your choosing. Number 1. Listen to Personal Finance Cat podcast, especially episode 2, Steps of Financial Planning. Many of the recommendations there would apply, such as pay down your debt, prepare a budget, live below your means, etc. Number 2. Save up even more than you normally would, and especially to your emergency fund if you don't have one. In case you lose your job during the recession, the emergency fund will really come in handy. Number 3. Invest in recession-proof assets. Our rental properties are a good example of recession-proof assets because they are generally C-class properties, so almost already at the bottom of the barrel. The idea is that people have to have a place to live no matter what the economic condition is. They can downgrade from A class to B class and from B class to C class, but they can't downgrade much more from C class. Other examples of recession-proof assets include gold, U.S. Treasury bonds, and cash. Anecdotally, during the Great Recession in 2008 and the subsequent years, stock prices of McDonald's and Walmart went up a lot. If you are an individual stock picker, keep that logic in mind. Number 4. This recession is also somewhat different in that there is an unprecedented war for talent. You may be able to boost your income by switching to a new job, which will help battle the real wage cut and help you save more. Number 5. If you have the stomach for it, increase your investment during the recession and during the crashes. Those are actually the best time to invest. You're buying something on discount and you're being greedy when others are fearful. You guessed it. Those are both quotes from Buffett. That's all, my friends. Are you ready for the next recession? By the way, Personal Finance Cat is now on YouTube, so please come visit, like, share, and subscribe. Leave a comment and I'll reply. Minor note, since YouTube is so competitive, you actually have to use quotation marks for the phrase front quote Personal Finance Cat, end quote, to find me. Just want to get my content out there on as many platforms as possible. As always, thanks so much for listening. I'll catch you next time.